Section 13 of the American Postal Service, Second Edition. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Michelle Fry, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The American Postal Service, Second Edition, by Louis Melius. Chapter 4, Special Articles, Part 8. Abraham Lincoln, postmaster in 1837. So much has been said and written about Abraham Lincoln that it would seem as if nothing new could be mentioned. In fact, his history and biography are as well known to the school children as that of George Washington. But it is probably not generally known to the postmasters of the country that he was at one time in the postal service as a postmaster, and in a book devoted entirely to postal affairs it may be of interest to state the fact that this additional incident in his life and public career may be added to what is already known. Mr. T.H. Bartlett, in the Boston Transcript, says, quote, "It will interest Lincoln lovers to learn that, as far as known, probably the first time that Abraham Lincoln's name was mentioned in print was in the United States Biennial Register for 1837. It was in the Post Office Department as, quote, 'Postmaster at New Salem, Illinois, Abraham Lincoln, 1/4, 10/1948.' The register contained the names of every officer and employee for that year." End quote. So people who keep scrapbooks in which to note peculiar events and occurrences in the lives of great men may add this little item to their collection, for everything connected with the life of Abraham Lincoln is worthy of notice. End quote. A central accounting office for each county. A very notable and far-reaching measure of public administration in the conduct of the Post Office Department was enacted in the past session of Congress, by which, in order to promote economy in the distribution of supplies and in auditing and accounting, the Postmaster General was authorized to designate districts and central offices in such districts through which supplies shall be distributed and accounts rendered. This means, in other words, that one postmaster in a county is hereafter to distribute supplies for the other post offices and render an account to the auditor for all the offices in a certain county or district, thus simplifying the whole subject and placing the business involved at each of these offices under one central control. This is, however, not to give such central office authority to abolish offices, to change officers or employees in offices included in such district. The law goes into effect July 1st, 1917, and the Postmaster General will appoint a committee, of which the first Assistant Postmaster General will probably be chairman, to establish the system and select the central office in each district or county to which the other offices are to report, and under whose general control this plan is to be conducted. Millions of money for good roads. That good roads are an important factor in the spread of civilization is a statement which no one will dispute. Imperial Rome, in the zenith of its power, perfectly understood this. The marvelous genius and industry which constructed its great highways of commerce and travel, works which have been the admiration of all succeeding ages, are yet splendid even in their decaying greatness. Prescott, the historian, in his romantic history of Peru, tells of the wonderful engineering skill displayed in the reigns of the early Peruvian rulers in the building of their great military roads, which served alike the purpose of a peaceful people as well as the rapid assembling of its armies for warlike action. No nation now neglects this very important part of its economic life, and the United States, having become a power in universal civilization, is fully alive to all the measureless advantages which good roads afford. Material prosperity waits upon road development, and land values rise in proportion to road improvement. A few striking instances may be mentioned as illustrating this fact. Wallace's Farmer has stated that, quote, "In Franklin County, New York, where 24 miles of good roads have been built, 8 pieces of land selected at random increased 27.8% in value. In Lee County, Virginia, which built 84 miles of roads, land advanced 25% in value. Spotsylvania County in the same state improved 41 miles of roads, and the land adjoining sold for $44.75, where previous to the improvement it had been bought for just $20 less per acre. After Manatee County, Florida, had constructed 64 miles of macadam and shell highway, the land along the road increased more than $20 per acre in less than 2 years, and the land a mile away from the road showed an increase of $10 an acre. In Wood County, Ohio, where land has been drained and bounded by limestone pikes, the values have risen from $70 to $250 per acre." End quote. The New York Journal of Commerce says, quote, "There are few agencies that are so fruitful of economic good, social and political solidarity, and even national spirit." End quote. The very great desire of the Post Office Department to extend and improve the rural delivery service is an ever-present argument in favor of good roads, without which no extensions or improvements are possible. The life of the country church, the country school, the whole question of intensive and scientific farming is involved in the subject of good roads, and in its wider and broader aspect the question takes on a new and very significant meaning. Originally intended to promote and foster the arts of peace, military needs now claim national attention. Quoting again from the Journal of Commerce, "Mobilization, defense, and the transportation of troops, munitions, and supplies are in a large part dependent on an adequate system of highways, especially along the seacoasts and national borders. The experience of all the warring nations of Europe in the present conflict are ample proof of this. Only the future will show whether or not these objects have been kept in view when the national appropriation is spent." End quote. The government has set aside for the year ending June 30th, 1919, the sum of $14,550,000 as an apportionment to the states to aid in the construction and maintenance of rural post roads in accordance with the provision of the federal aid road laws. $20 million will be apportioned for 1920, $25 million for 1921. This is the third apportionment under the law, $4,850,000 having been apportioned for 1917 and $9,700,000 for 1918. The Bureau of Public Roads states that the expenditures for road and bridge building in the United States have increased from about $80 million a year in 1904 to $282 million in 1915, or more than 250%. These figures are as amazing as they are impressive, and they must carry to the mind of the reader the solicitude of his government for all that makes for national prosperity and advancement. There was a time when good roads were a luxury, and only a few states in the East paid any attention to this question. With the advent of the automobile came a great change. Rides for pleasure as well as for gainful pursuits required better conditions, and for both purposes good roads became everywhere a question of paramount importance. The farmer, whose improved surroundings permitted this now common luxury, wanted the benefit of it, and the demand for better road conditions found its way into the halls of legislation in the states and in the Congress of the nation, and the answer to this demand upon the part of the federal government is the magnificent appropriation which is now available and to be expended for this far-reaching purpose. Rural delivery, in which the rural resident is so greatly interested, will profit most by this liberal government provision, it being originally intended for post-road purposes, of which rural delivery is now the principal and most important part. The rural life of the country is to be bettered in every way by the spread of this means of postal communication. The Post Office Department is always ready to listen to every suggestion which makes for greater comfort and convenience in this direction, and to act promptly when resulting advantages can be shown. Therefore, the sections where rural delivery is not as fully introduced and developed as it might be, or inviting fields for exploration and administrative action are not yet reached, the people for whose benefit this money is to be used should get in touch with the department and bring to its attention whatever information upon the subject they may possess which might be fashioned into useful results. The department has many eyes, but cannot see all and know all, and this is where outside assistance can be of great advantage and would be most gladly welcomed. Postal patrons are the working partners of the Postmaster General in all that concerns the improvement and extension of the service, and if they will take the same active interest that he does and cooperate with the Fourth Assistant Postmaster General, in whose bureau this rural delivery work is centered, great advances in all directions may be readily made. $14,550,000 for rural post roads. Apportionment to the states from government funds to aid in the construction and maintenance of rural post roads in accordance with the federal aid road laws for the year ending June 30th, 1919, is as follows: Alabama, $313,456. Arizona, $205,540. Arkansas, $250,018. California, $456,167. Colorado, $257,278. Connecticut, $92,216. Delaware, $24,411. Florida, $170,723. Georgia, $403,909. Maryland, $130,871. Massachusetts, $221,261. Michigan, $435,356. Minnesota, $425,865. Mississippi, $268,751. Missouri, $508,603. Montana, $298,520. Nebraska, $319,445. Nevada, $193,229. New Hampshire, $62,610. New Jersey, $177,357. New Mexico, $238,634. New York, $749,674. North Carolina, $342,556. North Dakota, $229,585. Ohio, $558,043. Oklahoma, $346,489. Oregon, $236,332. Pennsylvania, $690,145. Idaho, $182,471. Illinois, $658,323. Indiana, $406,230. Iowa, $434,653. Kansas, $429,131. Kentucky, $292,984. Louisiana, $203,755. Maine, $144,807. Rhode Island, $34,972. South Carolina, $215,014. South Dakota, $243,175. Tennessee, $340,663. Texas, $876,986. Utah, $170,763. Vermont, $68,128. Virginia, $298,120. Washington, $216,530. West Virginia, $159,713. Wisconsin, $382,707. Wyoming, $183,805. Mail extensions by air and motor truck routes. As the result of a recent conference between Postmaster General Burleson and Secretary of War Baker, and with the approval of the President, Congress has been asked to authorize the Secretary of War to turn over to the Post Office Department all military airplanes and motor vehicles not serviceable for military purposes, or which after the war may be dispensed with for military service. As soon as any airplanes are turned over to the Post Office Department, airplane mail routes will be established in the country, as they now are in Italy and France. Italy has an aerial mail route from her coast to Sardinia and is able to deliver 500 pounds of mail in 2 hours. France has a similar aerial route between her coast and Corsica. The motor trucks procured from the War Department at this time or at the close of the war will be available for the parcel post truck service. In the view of the Postmaster General, the operation of these motor truck routes would add 100% to the value of the parcel post service in the vicinity of the cities where established. The cost of living will be reduced, it is stated, by eliminating useless and expensive operation in the postal means of communication between producer and consumer, will permit the producer to continue production and the labor incident thereto, instead of suspending production or labor while conveying produce to consumers, and will extend the postal zone of collection and delivery service in the vicinity of large cities to the point where the actual farmer-producer is domiciled, rather than where only suburban residents and non-producers live. Care required in preparing contracts. Among the most important duties which a postmaster is called upon to perform is seeing that contracts for star route service are properly filled out before being sent to the department. These contracts are of a legal nature, and while the necessary provisions are plainly stated and simple enough to be easily understood, extreme care must be exercised to see that the instructions are complied with. Spaces for the signatures of the contractor, the sureties and witnesses properly filled out, dates given, names plainly written wherever required, and the contractor should personally examine the contract to see that all this is carefully done. Failure to note these necessary details causes the return of the contract for correction, delaying its acceptance and imposing extra and unnecessary work upon the contract clerk. It may also be stated that as failure to perform service on the part of the contractor is liable to bring these contracts into courts of law for judicial determination, it becomes of the highest importance that nothing required to be done is omitted in preparation, and the contract be correct in form and in every particular. Birthday of the American Postal Service. On the 26th of July, 1917, the Postal Service of the United States can celebrate the 143rd anniversary of its establishment. It was on July 26, 1775, nearly a year before the independence of the colonies was proclaimed, that the freedom of postal affairs was made an accomplished fact. The British control had existed for 83 years, from 1692 to 1775. There was only one line then in existence along the coast, with but few branches, and those far between. This service was first managed by private interests under a patent from William and Mary, but afterwards directly by the English crown. The fullness of time had at length arrived, had brought the auspicious day, and postal independence was born. Patriotic sentiment is not wanting in this country of ours, and the flag is ever the object of sincere and heartfelt devotion. The great strides in postal development from that day to this should make the pulse of every citizen, particularly every postal employee, great or small, quicken with civic pride as each successive anniversary of our great postal establishment brings the date to mind. Postmasters might well signalize the day by conspicuous display of the flag, under which such tremendous progress has been made, not only in postal affairs, but in national greatness and glory. List of Postmasters General. Postmasters General appointed by the Continental Congress. Benjamin Franklin, Pennsylvania, July 26, 1775. Richard Bach, Pennsylvania, November 7, 1776. Ebenezer Hazard, New York, January 28, 1782. Postmasters General appointed by presidents. President Washington, Samuel Osgood, Massachusetts, September 26, 1789. Timothy Pickering, Pennsylvania, August 12, 1791. Joseph Habersham, Georgia, February 25, 1795. President Jefferson, Gideon Granger, Connecticut, November 28, 1801. President Madison, Return J. Meigs, Jr., Ohio, April 11, 1814. President Monroe, John McLean, Ohio, July 1, 1823. President Jackson, William T. Barry, Kentucky, April 6, 1829. Amos Kendall, Kentucky, May 1, 1835. President Van Buren, John M. Niles, Connecticut, May 26, 1840. President W. H. Harrison, Francis Granger, New York, March 8, 1841. President Tyler, Charles A. Wycliffe, Kentucky, October 13, 1841. President Polk, Cave Johnson, Tennessee, March 6, 1845. President Taylor, Jacob Collamer, Vermont, March 1849. President Fillmore, Nathan K. Hall, New York, July 23, 1850. Samuel D. Hubbard, Connecticut, September 14, 1852. President Pierce, James Campbell, Pennsylvania, March 7, 1853. President Buchanan, Aaron V. Brown, Tennessee, March 6, 1857. Joseph Holt, Kentucky, March 14, 1859. President Lincoln, Horatio King, Maine, February 12, 1861. Montgomery Blair, District of Columbia, March 9, 1861. President Johnson, William Dennison, Ohio, October 1, 1864. Alex W. Randall, Wisconsin, July 25, 1866. President Grant, John A. J. Creswell, Maryland, March 5, 1869. James W. Marshall, New Jersey, July 7, 1874. Marshall Jewell, Connecticut, September 1, 1875. James N. Tyner, Indiana, July 12, 1876. President Hayes, D. M. Key, Tennessee, March 13, 1877. Horace Maynard, Tennessee, August 25, 1880. Presidents Garfield and Arthur, Thomas L. James, New York, March 8, 1881. President Arthur T. O. Howe, Wisconsin, January 5, 1882. W. Q. Gresham, Indiana, April 11, 1883. Frank Hatton, Iowa, October 14, 1884. President Cleveland William F. Vilas, Wisconsin, March 7, 1885. Don M. Dickinson, Michigan, January 17, 1888. President Harrison John Wanamaker, Pennsylvania, March 6, 1889. President Cleveland Wilson S. Bissell, New York, March 7, 1893. William L. Wilson, West Virginia, April 4, 1895. President McKinley James A. Gary, Maryland, March 6, 1897. Charles Emory Smith, Pennsylvania, April 22, 1898. President Roosevelt Henry C. Payne, Wisconsin, January 15, 1902. Robert J. Wynne, Pennsylvania, October 10, 1904. George B. Cottledew, New York, March 7, 1905. George Von L. Meyer, Massachusetts, March 4, 1907. President Taft Frank H. Hitchcock, Massachusetts, March 6, 1909. President Wilson Albert S. Burleson, Texas, March 5, 1913. End of section 13.